I started teaching, my troubled relationship with the father of my children ended in 1970. I moved to a larger apartment with my children where I had a bigger studio space. I picked up more teaching jobs and produced original prints at a furious pace, always inspired by the process and the colors in the distance and the river below me. Rivers, neatly plowed fields, and ancient twisting olive trees inspired me greatly. I also had a couple of one-person shows in Rome. And we also did a lot of traveling through Europe at that time. We went as far north as Germany and as far south as Israel. And all of this traveling really opened my eyes to landscapes and cultures in exciting new ways. Back in Boston, I continued the vigorous pace of raising twins, teaching, exhibiting, and doing art. I perfected my printmaking skills and I wrote the book Silkscreening, published by Prentice Hall in 1977. I was also commissioned to create a large work of art, a porcelain enamel frieze, which is on top of an elementary school in Chinatown. Around this time, I also became very active with the Boston Visual Artists Union and worked with many other artists to develop exhibit opportunities and to secure our rights as artists. The union was the focus of my life for 6 years. I held various offices and was editor of our newsletter and became Secretary General, as well as participating in many group shows. Around 1980, I did not do as much silk screening as I had been doing, but I started doing collages and working with fabric and doing weavings. At the end of this gallery, you'll see two of the fabric pieces. I continued to teach, and I think teaching was very vital because I learned so much from my students and how they would respond in their very unique ways to the exercises I suggested. So around 1980, something happened. I had become very aware of artist rights from many union discussions. I began to see the larger picture of human rights and the need for social and economic justice. My twins graduated from high school in 1985, and I was finally not responsible for them on a daily basis, and I felt the need to move. So I took to the road and drove from Boston to Nicaragua in a VW bus. And that trip took about a year, and that's resulted in this book eventually. But this trip was a revelation to me. It showed me the poverty, endurance, and kindness of poor people in Central America. And I saw things that I couldn't forget. In Nicaragua, my art became, Nicaragua was as far south as I was going to go. My art became serious, sweaty carpentry as I worked as a long-term Habitat for Humanity volunteer. I worked with local families, and we built sturdy post and beam houses to replace the shacks and the kind of lean-tos that people were living in. When I returned to Boston, I continued to work with Habitat as a volunteer coordinator and construction supervisor. I continued doing my own art and exhibiting and gained a deeper appreciation of nature from backpacking trips to Maine. I started hiking back and forth on parts of the Appalachian Trail in Maine, and I liked it so much that in 1990, I had a chance to move into an old one-room schoolhouse way in the middle of the White Mountain National Forest. Here I found a perfect environment, rich with the drama of nature and creative solitude. For 2 years, I didn't have a day job. I had time to intensely explore new directions in my art. Prior to this, I was pretty much working in these big flat shapes. I'm sort of happy doing that. But when I had all of this solitude in the house, I was just surrounded by the great beauty of nature. It just, my art had to grow, it had to go in some other directions. So I began exploring drawing and watercolor using shadow and light and new imagery from living surrounded by trees and silent deer and all of the beauty and detail of nature. With these new works, I reflected celebration, visual prayer, and reverence for the earth. I lived in Maine for 4 years. That also did result in a book. Everything results in a book. Okay, solitude and splendor. I'll talk a little bit about this more. I lived in Maine for 4 years and then responded to a need to stretch by joining the Peace Corps in 1995. Somehow, I always remember the Peace Corps has no age limit. You know, you just apply and get in. I wasn't planning to go to Bolivia. I wanted to go to Guatemala because Guatemala has a very rich indigenous culture that I was interested in. But Bolivia also has many very interesting indigenous cultures. Bolivia delighted me with its colorful people, cultures, and stirring music, echoing the Andean wind. I worked with the Tanga Tanga Children's Museum in Sucre, Bolivia, where I taught art and coordinated projects about prehistoric rock art, crafts, and different aspects of Bolivian life. When I returned to Boston from the Peace Corps, I was stunned by the high rate of inflation. So I got myself in gear and I worked in the Boston public schools, but I continued painting in acrylics and oils. I started doing these kinds of things. I'll talk about those later. I did sell some art to the Fogg Museum and the Boston Public Library. Those of you who are older artists will understand that we have a lot of art and it's good and it's beautiful and it brings meaning to the world, but it has to go somewhere. So I was able to donate close to 500 artworks through the Boston Art Connection and the Rhode Island Art Connection. And these works were donated to different nonprofits in the area. So the nonprofits agreed to frame the work and hang it in their offices where their clients can enjoy the work. It gets the work out, and I'm also very much a performer, so just doing all of this stuff and hiding it in portfolios in a closet doesn't appeal to me. I need to get the work out. So I didn't get paid for providing this artwork, but I did get a good sense of satisfaction because I know my art is where it can be appreciated and it can cheer up people who are often at a troubled time in their lives. And I should say that music is a big part of my life. I'm a soprano, I play guitar and keyboards, and I perform as much as possible. And I don't know what I like to do more, whether it's to do music or to do art. I really like to do both very, very much, but I do love lots and lots of music. So I'm always trying to perform. I'm almost at the end of this. Remember, this is large type, so it's not as long as it looks like it could be. Currently, I do want to say I do very well with simple abundance as I paint, write, sing, and work for things I believe are important. My conscience for social justice motivates me to continue to advocate for a better world. And so now I'm looking for page 11. Hold on. Oh, it's right here. A big part of my life is working for things that I believe in. So I volunteered, of course I volunteered with Habitat, but I volunteered also with Boston's Ecclesia Ministries way back 2000 something, but I'm back with them again, and I do the music for Common Cathedral on Sunday, which is an outdoor church. I went back there during the pandemic when every other church was locked up, nobody could get in, but Common Cathedral kept going. So what I do there is I play keyboards, and there's a bunch of people that sing with me and do percussion. I also volunteer at Common Art, which is a really wonderful program that meets every Wednesday from 8:30 to 2. And it's an art program and a very dynamic community in which homeless people can explore their creativity through the visual arts. And it's just a wonderful atmosphere. Not everybody that comes to Common Art does art, people will come to socialize or to eat, drink coffee, things like that. But it's where I need to be on Wednesdays. So in summary, I would say the process of making art is always an exciting adventure for me, full of surprises. Inspiration is my common companion. I believe art, whether it is painting, words, or music, is important in all our lives. And I think you would agree, those of you that are artists, art gives us beauty and meaning, and it can motivate us to work for good things like peace and justice. So I would say my art right now, I feel like it's very focused around activism, like helping my homeless brothers and sisters. That we need many other things to survive. And also, I have tried to educate people a lot about our health. 2004, I realized that, you know, I can go so far with visual art. My art is shapes and colors and images, but it's not narrative. So there were things that I had to put in words. So the first memoir I wrote is Solitude and Splendor. And this is about living in a one-room schoolhouse in Maine for 2 years, which I already mentioned, which was sort of a catalyst for my art, for you know, getting me to go in other directions, and also a catalyst for making me more aware of the danger our planet is in, you know, from experiencing the beauty of nature all around me. So this is a book about living in that one-room schoolhouse and fixing it up. I made it very, very comfortable. It was a real fixer-upper. And then I wrote this book called The Artist and Spy, which is like this, you know, sort of a scary book, but the most pivotal event in my life was the relationship I had with the father of my children, and which resulted in twins. And I know a lot of times you think, oh, you know, you're in a bad situation. You'll have the baby, you'll give it up for adoption. You cannot give up twins for adoptions. They are part of you. So this is the story of that relationship and now how it ended. It ended okay for me and my kids, but it didn't end good for the father of my children. But I felt compelled to write about it. So this is memoir, it's true. The third memoir is called Driving Curiosity. I already mentioned that. And this is essentially a journal about the trip I took from Boston to Nicaragua in 1986. So I drove in this old VW bus and I took my time. I drove very, very slowly. Most of the time I slept in the bus, and I went through Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And I spent a lot of time in the Texas southern border working with refugees. So this is sort of a day-by-day thing, lots of photographs. And as I mentioned, everything seemed new. I was in all these different cultures, and my Spanish got pretty good from traveling on the road. And then this is my latest book. It's called Through the Mountains to the Stars, which is a collection of 29 narrative essays about aspects of traveling in Latin America. Part of that included a freighter trip from Fort Lauderdale to Chile, going across the desert from Argentina to Chile, teaching as a volunteer at this crazy school in Ecuador. I don't know, it still exists. It's really pretty amazing. So I put a lot of that into, well, I was always writing. When I traveled, I had these small notebooks that would fit into a fanny pack. I didn't leave those notebooks anywhere, and they fit right here, and I was always writing. So I would start transcribing what I wrote into these stories. This has a lot of photographs also. And Bolivia is a pretty amazing place. So all of that stuff is in this book here. So the books are here. So I do a lot of things. A lot of times I've been tempted to think that I'm crazy for doing a lot of things. You know how that is. You say, whoa, why should I be doing this? Or people think I'm an artist, but I'm, you know. So the way I figured it out was, my life is a weaving of many colored strands, woven on life's loom by time's busy hands. So I think that's how I would sort of justify the, I go in a lot of directions, but I like it. So for those, I'll say a little bit about the works. How are we doing on time? Do we have time? Well, we have a few minutes.
Oh, yes, do that.
Oh, okay. So, as I mentioned, for many years, my main screen was silkscreen. So these are all silkscreen. Actually, I think most of the works here are silkscreen. And I started doing this in the late 60s. Andy Warhol made silkscreen popular, where he would take an image and do all these things to it, which you can do. If you have the stencil on the screen, you can print in different colors, you can print off register, and you do a lot of color manipulation and things. Carita Kent, Sister Carita, popularized the medium also. So I was attracted to it because the colors are very, very rich. You don't get colors this rich with block printing or lithography. The colors are very, very rich. And I think essentially I'm a colorist, you know, I'm a sucker for colors. Some of my more recent acrylics just are these flower shapes, and they're just an excuse to use color the way I want to. So the color, the prints, the printing for silkscreen is essentially a stencil process, and you form a stencil on a screen. This is a baby, little baby one made out of plywood, and for this one, I had a big screen about 22 by 32 inches. So the screen has to be as big as the final work. But this is a little baby one, which is perfect for printing greeting cards and things. So you can form a stencil by, you can use glue, water-soluble glue, and you can use paper, tracing paper, wax paper, or different kinds of film. What you block out doesn't print. And then you print by, you put your paper here, and then you bring the screen down and you squeegee, this is a scraper, but it works just as well. Squeeze the ink through the silk, lift it up, take the paper out, hang it up to dry, and put in another paper. So it's a stencil process. With silk screening, you can print many copies of your print. It's a form of fine art printing, and usually what you'll see with fine art prints, like block printing or etching, on the left, you see the edition number. This is 29 out of a total of 48, the title of the print, and the artist's signature. So silk screening is often called serigraphy. I think that's a fancier term, but it's the same thing, same process. It's a process that is used a lot commercially for t-shirts, fabric printing, wallpaper printing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was very lucky. I taught for about 20 years at the Cambridge Center, mainly silk screening, and had wonderful students. Just it's a nice atmosphere, nice place to teach. I taught at a few other places also, but I think I like the Cambridge Center the best. So, as I said, being in the schoolhouse led me to do other things. So I started doing watercolors, which I don't have any watercolors here except the ones that are loose. See, there's one there. Oh, glue. Yeah. So I don't want to have you guys walking all over the place. Make life simple. I started doing a lot of watercolors. I started doing tempera paint. I also started doing a lot of colored pencil, none of which is here, but I like colored pencils because they slowed me down. You know, they were very, very meditative, and they were small. You really couldn't go bigger than like 9 by 12 inches. So I did a lot of those. This is a watercolor. I don't know if this has anything to do with it. There's a whole bunch of fish back here too. I did these about 15 years ago from some small sketches, and I did a whole lot of other watercolors with using some figures from rock art, different rock art images, doing a lot of stuff with leaves, like with oak leaves, which are sort of my favorite, one of my favorite images. But I have a lot of these fish back there, and watercolor is a tricky medium if you try to control it. But I enjoy just splashing around in it and just feeling very, very free and letting it do what it wanted to do. So watercolors back there in our frame. If you go over there, you'll see some of the more recent acrylics. Can we go over there, Jordan?
Yes.
Yeah, let's, well, before we go over there, maybe, so I would say a third of the work in this exhibit is within the last 2 years. So I finally was able to set up a really good studio. Do you see that? Yeah. Okay. In my basement, it's a big white room kind of space. But I started using cutouts of all of these rock art images from way back when I was in the Peace Corps. One of the projects the museum I was working with was focusing on was to educate children in Bolivia that this is like part of their national heritage, these images of rock art. They're either carved into the rock or sometimes painted on the rock. So I started using them in my own art and playing around with them and everything. The particular process here is that I would paint these backgrounds with acrylic, and these images were metallic fabric that was fused to this kind of plastic interfacing. And then I cut out the shapes, and then I could just iron them on. And I also came up with titles for these. This is called Glimmering in the First Age of the Earth. So I wanted the titles to just reflect the long time between these images and now. So this is pretty current. And we can go over to the current painting section. Over here. Oh, sorry, my stuff. So these are also very recent. And like I said, to me, this is just pure color the way I like it. If you think of Albers, who did the square within a square, and use these sort of very dull colors, but somehow made it work, made these squares sort of vibrate. I like these kind of colors, so I use this image. There's a whole series of 13, the flower color ripple series, and so these four go together. But it was, I guess it was pure joy painting these, just using the colors that were just so delicious for me. There have been times when I've tried to paint music. This came out as blue flower music. I think of these little things as notes or something, or sounds. There's another painting over to the left, same size. It's called Summer Sunset Scherzo, with color that sort of, I call it a scherzo, which in Italian means joke, and the colors sort of bounce around. And if you turn around, I got very interested in these dot things. Why did I become interested in dots? For one thing, it sort of solves your composition problems. If you have dots all over the place, people don't care if something's not quite balanced. But it also gave me an opportunity to like put purple and orange together and magenta and blue, and just get into, they started out with a background of flat colors, flat brilliant colors, and then I put these dots all over them just to get some kind of vibration happening. These two are the exact opposite. I just felt like doing something joyful, something with a rainbow. Rainbows are really big. And as you can see over here, we have Rainbow City with twins. being a rainbow, and the valley being a rainbow, and this a kind of rainbow here. And I just like working with those colors. I tried to get a feel of transparency here, where the blue, where the purple and the blue would meet, where the pink and the blue would give you purple and something, you know, just like working with those colors. And then for a while I latched on this butterfly image of all the ways a butterfly could be fun. You could have a butterfly in the snow just being beautiful and being a butterfly. And then it could be a rainbow butterfly also. So I don't know what else to say. If you have any questions, oh, I know we were going to do Q&A. So you can come back to your seats and think of some questions. And then I think we should end because I think that hour is up. June? Yeah.
I heard of you as a leaf dancer. Would you tell?
Oh, sure, leaf dancer. Let me tell you, my style has become a little cramped since I had all this knee surgery. I was leaf dancing just a few days ago, and it's kind of joy about leaves when you get, especially in the fall when you're walking through a pile of fallen leaves. And and leaf dancing is the name of my CD, which has 17 songs on it. It's an image, and also I think it is what I aspire to be, something that really respects and loves leaves and trees. So I like the name Maria Leaf Dancer. It has a lot of vividness and meaning to me. So.
What can your art do for environmental crisis?
What can we do as artists?
Yeah, what can you? Yeah,
Yeah,
how will that art? Because obviously that's a whole new force.
Yeah,
influencing us.
well, there's some different answers to that. One is to use materials that are non-toxic, that are not petroleum based. I think the other is to somehow maybe not produce so much art that takes up so much space. You know, maybe switch to music or activism. Good at that situation too. But at this gallery, John is organizing yet another exhibit, which will focus on art and the environment and how places have suffered as a result of climate change, which has been created by our disregard for the planet and not treating the planet with love and carelessness and over-consumerism. So a lot of artists do have art that does turn to the environment. If not, sometimes it may be like reflecting the beauty of the earth, which I try to do in some of my stuff. Other times raise questions and shed light on problems and shed light on danger. So I know my art focuses on, my art is not narrative. I'm not trying to tell a story. I just delight in the colors and the shapes, and that's the way I operate. But other artists do focus on some narrative things and can present the dangers and make it visible and make it very, very moving. I have done that a little bit. I did that with some collages I did last year from using images from magazines and words and things.
This is your retrospective. Do you have a future show coming, or are you redesigning your creative energy?
Well, that's a good question too. I think the same. I would like to have homes for all this art. It does worry me where it's going to go. I do some art. I do smaller things right now. Do music, activism, but I don't think I want to do tons and tons more of art that's going to take up physical space. I mean, this is something that a lot of us older artists have to wrestle with, and I don't think anybody's really come up with a good solution so far. One of the things I've heard, A lot of us are not famous. We do our art. Our art is what it is. It's not like, we're not superstars, but you hear so many stories about how artists become famous after they die. And I had a dealer tell me once to my face, and he said, when you're dead, your art will become valuable. And so I said, well, that's not a career option. And it is very crazy. I mean, the art world, such as it is, whatever it is, it doesn't really work for artists because there's such an immense focus on popularity, brand names. And, you know, I know if I was Damien Hirst, this would go like really quickly, you know, but I actually have been doing these flower paintings with branches, just like Damien Hirst. He was, you know, his are going for like thousands and thousands of dollars. But a lot of people don't buy art because it's famous, blah, blah, blah. And that, you know, you can be looking at pretty much the same thing by an unknown artist and just not appreciate it. I see you nodding in agreement. Yes, because, you know, we've all been there.
Jackie, that art connection thing doesn't exist anymore.
Art connection
Which
is
was a lovely
awesome.
way of getting the art to somewhere, not necessarily using the money.
Yeah.
Art. And it's so sad that there's not that
It
option
should be
for artists.
coming back in Boston, but the Art Connection Rhode Island is alive and flourishing.
Okay.
There is an art connection in the Washington DC area, and I've contributed work with them. So one of the things the Art Connection did before it did close was they had some workshops and they brought together people from all over the country and sort of spread the good news about the Art Connection. I want to say that all of my dealings with the Art Connection Boston and Rhode Island have been very, very well. They treat the artists very respectfully. They don't place one of your artworks in any institution unless you approve it. And, you know, it's I'm not making money, but the works are treated very respectfully. But you're right, it should come back in Boston. It did close.
It is gonna come back.
Well, it shouldn't. Well, because there's a need.
Oh, okay.
There are artists. We've got plenty of artists, but it does exist in, I know, in the DC area and in Rhode Island. So it is a really a good way for artists to have their work be respected and appreciated, and that's so critical.
Among your many endeavors, you mentioned that you were doing graduate studies in a seminary in art, religion and art.
Oh, that was some time ago. Yeah, that was a long, long time ago.
Is your art spiritual?
All art is spiritual. I mean, it's something of the inside art of an artist. It's how we are in this form or in music. So I think all art is spiritual. But I didn't pursue that as much as I thought I did.
Did you ever meet Rita Ken?
I met her once. You know, she's very nice. So, should we wrap up? I think that's plenty of time.
Yes.
Thank you.